Hey, Amelia.
Hey, Janine.
I'm going to check out a movie. Want to come?
Sure.
Welcome to the very first episode of Check Out Cinema, a podcast where we check out movies from the local library and review them. I'm Darrell Winfree, and I'm joined by my co-host, Amelia Winburn.
Hello.
And we're really excited to start this podcast. It's just an opportunity to share a little bit about the movies we love and the place we love to get them from.
The local library.
The local library. So for our very first episode, we decided to choose a movie that is quite popular in terms of standing the test of time, but maybe not a movie everybody's seen.
Or even heard of.
Right. And the movie that we chose is Victor Sjöström's 1928 film, The Wind, starring Lillian Gish. I chose this movie because I have heard a lot of things about it and I've never seen it. So I thought, what a great movie to choose for our first episode together. Did you know anything about the film before we started?
No, actually, when you suggested it, that was my first time ever hearing of it. I also don't think I even knew who Lillian Gish was until we saw this movie.
And isn't she wonderful?
She is. I, can't say thank you enough to introducing me to my very first Gish. I've got the ish for Gish.
That's a direct quote from D.W. Griffith. So Lillian Gish, of course, is one of the most famous silent film stars. She was a D.W. Griffith fave, of course. I think one of her most influential films that I've seen previously would probably be Broken Blossoms. She is quite melodramatic in that one. And in the copy of The Wind that we checked out from the library, Lillian Gish does an introduction to the film. And in it, I think she says quite succinctly that she already was known for having sad endings. I think what she actually said was that one unhappy ending could ruin your career, and I already had 7.
That's quite a few. So Birth of a Nation, Broken Blossoms, Intolerance.
Yeah, I think she just kind of was...
I've seen her in La Boheme. Yeah.
She just often does not have a good outcome in her films. But I think it's also because she plays such a perfectly innocent girl that it's almost appealing to kind of put her in those situations where all hope seems lost. And that's something that The Wind does. All hope does seem lost. So let's back up a little bit. Kind of went ahead of ourselves there, getting excited about Gish, but The Wind, things that I had heard about it were, it's one of the latest silent films, being in 1928 and sound film becoming popularized by 1927. It actually had a delayed publication because they were worried not only that it was silent, but also worried about the dramatic tinge of the film. And actually it did lose money because people were not lining up to see silent films anymore now that the sound barrier had broken, essentially. It's really interesting to me that we get to see this pinnacle of what the silent film era and its directors could achieve because they've had such a long time at this point to perfect their art. And yet that was also its downfall, that it came at the end of the silent era. I saw a clip of The Wind in the documentary series, The Story of Film, and it talked a lot about the emotional display of The Wind and in the camera work. And it looked so beautiful and appealing that I just wanted to do it for this podcast. Plus, when we found out it was on VHS at the library, we were like, well, we have to.
VHS is such it's like a fossil. It's so rare to uncover those and enjoy them.
Yeah, and also it's interesting because The Wind does not really have a definitive Blu-ray or DVD release. It only really has this VHS copy, but it is also in the public domain. So although I encourage everyone to go to the library and see if you have a copy of it, you can actually watch it through the Internet Archive as well. So why don't we talk a little bit about this film? Let's give a brief summary. How about in your own words, Amelia?
I would probably start by warning folks that this is a silent horror.
Oh, definitely.
A young, frail woman journeys to the wild frontier, to the ends of the earth, essentially, as she knows it, and reluctantly adapts to the harsh conditions and harsher way of life as a frontierswoman. All the while she is sort of wound up and riled up by the incessant, unceasing wailing winds and flying, stinging sand. Can she withstand these maddening conditions, or will she break?
Right. The wind is really another character in the film. I feel like the wind is ever present, it's oppressive, and it really is suffocating. It traps her. A lot like the societal expectations, I think, of a woman going out to the West. It's just such an effective metaphor. And I did see that the novel that the film is based on by Dorothy Scarborough is actually described as a supernatural novel. So I think those elements are definitely at play here in this movie. And interestingly enough, Lillian Gish said in her intro to the VHS copy that we checked out from the library that she was actually the driving force behind getting this film produced. At this point, Lillian Gish was very popular, and she had a lot of that star power into bringing stories to the studio. This was with MGM. She had been signed with MGM a few years prior in 1925, and she read the novel and thought it would be perfect for adaptation. So she brought it to Frances Marion. She actually had a 4-page story outline she brought to Frances Marion, who then created a screenplay. And she chose the director, Victor Sjöström, because of work they had done together on The Scarlet Letter, which was, again, another unhappy ending that she had had. And she also chose the leading man, too.
She has really good taste in leading men. Her leading fellow, his character name, Lige, which I guess is, cultural vernacular for maybe like Elijah.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
To me, that kind of like made him like almost biblical.
And the actor's name is Lars Hansen.
Lars Hansen.
Yes, he is very handsome.
He's very handsome. He's got that, cowboy frontiersman quality to him. Kind of the rough, calloused hands of manual labor. His character is known for being very lucky, Lige the Lucky. Mm-hmm. They didn't call him that, but
you could tell.
You could tell. He's very, very lucky.
And she chose him because of just she admired his work in Swedish films. Mm-hmm. And
me too, I guess.
Yeah, I know. I need to check out his work because actually he's pretty charming.
Very good. He is charming. Yeah. I agree with you.
So they all went to Bakersfield, California, into the Mojave Desert. Everyone wore goggles, tied bandanas around their faces so they wouldn't inhale the sand. And 8 airplane propellers were brought to blow the sand around. It was so hot there, like multiple days over 100 degrees, that she actually burnt her hand on a door handle and said later it even damaged her hair, the heat. She said it was the most uncomfortable experience she had in pictures. And the film, as we've already intimated, it does have quite an unhappy, tense storyline, but it does end on a positive note because exhibitors just really thought there was no way to sell this picture with the original unhappy ending that they had planned, which was that her character, Letty, would be driven to madness and just walk out into the desert to die.
Or succumb
to the wind. So that particular tidbit has apparently been challenged. Like Louis B. Mayer's biography states that an alternate ending was never shot, that was always the planned ending. But I trust Gish more than I trust Louis B. Mayer. So this was actually Lillian Gish's last silent film. It was one of Sjöström's last films in America.
Wow.
And it was the last major MGM silent.
Go out with a bang, because this is phenomenal.
There's a reason it's on the Library of Congress's preserved films list. It is chosen for being culturally significant. And I think it really holds up. I mean, it's really quite beautiful. There were so many interesting shots in the film. I really think what stood out to me was throughout the film, a couple of times, the imagery of the wind. So there's this constant presence of wind just blowing dust everywhere in this town. But they also intimate that there is a bigger storm called a norther, and it's described as being a horse in the clouds.
The visual metaphor of the white horse that like bucks and brays, this like wild stallion, this untamable being, entity, force. I really enjoyed that like superimposition of the horse over the like dark rolling clouds, and it tossing up all the sand and moving all that around, it charging at her. That was really something so special, and just
it really was. I mean, every time it happened, even if you kind of expected to see, it was still just like, whoa, that is great. Especially near the end of the film, when it becomes clear that there is a huge psychological toll weighing on Letty from the wind, just the constant presence of it, and really including the imagery of the wind as well. Like throughout the film, every time you see Letty kind of just struggling with what's going on around her, inevitably there's a shot of the wind
through the window, like her looking out, and it's just this abyss,
right?
This nothingness, like she's never faced anything like this before.
Yeah,
almost looking for some sort of comfort somewhere, and there really is none.
Right. As one of the intertitles says, when Letty is crying, it says wind, sand, sand, wind, yesterday, tomorrow, forever.
That's bleak.
It's just so succinct too. And it really like just shows what's going on in her brain. And that happens later on when I think one of the final images of the horse is when she is really just, it's clear that she is losing her grip on reality. And Gish, I mean, you can see her eyes kind of rolling into the back of her head, and she's just slowly rocking back and forth. And the camera switches to show her point of view as like the cabin is moving back and forth. And in this moment, I think around this same time is the transposed image of the horse. And it just shows how the wind has even infected her brain essentially at this point. So throughout the story, what happens is that Gish's character, whose name is Letty, she travels out to the West to stay with her cousin Beverly. They were raised together. Beverly is a man, by the way, even though I always think of like Beverly Clearly, you know? I was like,
it's a girl's name.
I was a little confused, like which one's the cousin? Because Beverly invites Letty to stay with him on his farm. And he also lives there with his wife, Cora, and their children. And Cora immediately does not like Letty.
She doesn't trust her.
Right. In that classic silent film, like, just get it all out there. One thing I liked about this film really was like, man, this film gets to the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just, like, from the get-go, like, immediately also you see, like, the oppressive, like, gender dynamics at play. The first scene when she's on the train, and inevitably a man comes sit next to her, you know, to talk to her and to impress her or to kind of be like,
like rescue her.
Yeah.
Because immediately the wind blows open her window seat.
Yeah.
It takes a man to tame that wind.
And that man is Wirt Roddy is his name.
He's the Wirt.
He is truly terrible. And it's played by Montague Love. And I don't know anything else he's been in. Trying to think.
I love that name, though.
Yeah. I think The Wind is one of his better known roles. And he plays quite a compelling villain. You are really rooting against him.
Yeah, oh God. There was just something so conniving about him. And the costuming in this film does a really fabulous job of differentiating him from the actual locals of this town. There's a community event, a community dance.
Hoedown.
The hoedown that gives you the sense of, you know, what life and fun is like on the frontier. And his clothes are absolutely spotless, completely solid black velvet, it looks like, or just, you know, black silk. And everybody else is really dusty. Mm. He dusts some characters off, like, you got a little something on you, a little schmutz. But he is just so separate from them, even though he lives in this world. Like, yeah. It feels like he can sort of, you know, flit in and out of it. He, you know, not of this world, but he's in it fleetingly.
Because isn't he a cattle trader?
Trader. Yes, I believe that's his job. He trades cattle. Meanwhile, these folks, they, rustle cattle. They herd it to and from, and it seems like he has the, hands-off approach to it.
Right. And, Liege and his partner, Sourdough, who's kind of the comedic relief, if a film like this can have a comedic relief, they're all pursuing Letty. And it's just so funny because, like, film doesn't really waste a lot of time like a modern film was. Like, there's no really getting to know Letty in this space other than you see her doing the chores.
Yeah.
Her cousin's wife, Cora, and you kind of see her being uneasy about the wind. But, there's no real, like, showing how much time has passed. So it kind of looks like she's just fresh off the train, and these guys are like, I'm going to ask this girl to marry me.
I love her. She's been here so long. I love her. She's so beautiful. We don't get that. We don't get a feel for who either man is either.
Yeah.
The more modern films, we would it would become like a character study, and that's certainly because we would have the sound and the dialogue to, for Letty to say, I'm Letty and I like long walks on the beach, or I hate sand and I love, grass. We don't get to know them in the same way. And it did seem really sudden.
Yeah.
And I was a little confused. I was like, y'all just met her. Like, slow down.
Right. And Sourdough and Liege both decide they're going to propose to Letty at this hoedown. And there is a tornado that blows through the town, and they all take shelter. And while they're taking shelter, that little worm, Wirt, he, gets up close to her. Is like, let me take you out of here. Let me get you away from all this. You don't need. And she doesn't even say anything. She just clearly looks uncomfortable, but he just keeps talking her through it. Like, I'll take you out of here. Just think about it. Just think about my offer. And then after that happens, they all get out of what I think is really funny is there's a tornado that blows through town. It shuts down the hoedown, but only temporarily.
Yeah. You can't stop the party.
Yeah, they get back to business. And Sourdough and Liege both propose, and they're basically like, just choose between us, like flip a coin, like one of us will do for you, right? And she laughs it off. She thinks they're joking, and their feelings get hurt. But like, why wouldn't she think that they're joking?
I guess to me in that moment, I was kind of like, this seems a little...
It was a little mean.
I was like, this seems a little childish, Letty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. How do I feel about you? Is that too modern of us? I mean...
Oh, we can't not watch this through a modern lens.
You're absolutely right. I know. You're so right. It is just like, you're being mean, girl. Like, they both handed you the same ring.
Yeah.
They only got one between them. It probably cost a lot. So, don't laugh at them.
Cora sees this proposal or overhears them saying that they're going to propose to Letty. And she's like, good, get this girl out of my house. I don't like her. And it's just so funny because, like, we watched a little bit of it together at first, and then I was watching it again to finish the film, and I was rewatching the scene where Letty comes to Beverly's house for the first time, and Beverly carries her over the threshold.
I didn't notice that. I noticed he kisses her.
Yeah.
On the cheek.
He, like, picks her up and carries her over the threshold, and I was like, you know what? If my husband did that with some other girl, I'd also be like, I don't like you.
I don't like you. That's weird. And especially like family like that.
Yeah.
There is something odd, but...
I mean, it's also the frontier, right? Like, marrying your cousin, maybe not
so
the most unheard of
It's the Wild
thing.
West.
Yeah.
Just, anything goes out there, but...
And
that's a good catch. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I like totally missed it at first. Like he like, and of course once he comes in, it's like, oh look, Letty's here. Cora's like, so she'll be here a while. I don't need to go say hi to her right now. I was like, whoa, from the get-go, okay. But Cora doesn't like Letty because not only is she jealous of Beverly and Letty's familial relationship, the children also like Letty. And that hurts her feelings, even though, like, when she gets upset about it, she's just been butchering a cow and her hands are covered in blood. And she gets upset that her children don't, like, come to hug her with her blood-covered hands. Which is like, I would have to really love somebody to hug them when they've got cow's blood all over them.
Yeah, it sort of seems it's like I kind of wonder, like, well, how many times have y'all done that before? I'm sure before, you would have hugged her no matter how she looked. That's just the reality of frontier life, right? As a mother.
Right.
And then now suddenly some new person comes around, y'all start acting brand new around me. Y'all act like you don't know me. That would hurt my feelings as a mother.
So, well, I mean, Cora made it very clear. She was like, you've got to take one of these men's offer because I don't want you in my house. You got to be gone. So she decides, well, Wirt, he's got some money. He said he would take me away from here. Let me hear him out in his offer. And Wirt then reveals he's got a full-on second family.
Schmuck.
He is not a good guy through and through. And there's this moment when Letty lets this reality weigh in on her, and then she, goes back out to Cora, who then kind of goes like, fine, get back in my car. I'll take you somewhere else. And she just drops her off at Liege and Sourdough's place because they live like 15 miles from her place. And they get married. And Liege is... he's interesting. He's a very handsome actor, and he's a good actor. The character is not really that easy to like, I think. What do you think about him?
Well, I guess I'm kind of a sucker because I think he's handsome. And so whatever. He can do whatever. He can do no wrong. But I know exactly what you're asking, because there's a scene where, okay, they get married quickly. He puts the ring on her finger. It's sort of obscure. Like, it's sort of like you're not sure who she's married because it's just two hands. Her dainty hand getting the ring put on it, and then very obviously a man's hand placing the ring on her hand. So you're not sure between the two who she's married, and both men cross the threshold into the home, and then you realize very clearly that it's Lodge that she's married. So I think she made the right choice there, because Sourdough is an old man and she's far too young, and she deserves this handsome young buck. But he charges her, charges at her, busts open the door.
Yeah.
We're married and we haven't even kissed each other yet. We've been married a whole hour and we haven't kissed each other yet. And so he's expecting, his wife to love him, which I don't think he's wrong to assume that or even hope that, but in the act of him bum rushing her for this very forceful kiss, that's certainly hard to see. It does sort of seem like the wind, I blame the wind and the wild frontier has whipped up his passions into a frenzy, and that he is finally able to act out like he has an outlet for this pent up emotions that he's never been able to sort of release. But then after truly he does force himself on her. He grabs her and kisses her. That's very much what that is. And she fights back in a way and lets him know, you've made me hate you now. I could never love you. There's no chance. You forced this through your choice and through your actions. And he says, I'll never lay another hand on you. He learned his lesson quick, which is another thing that I liked, which the whole time made me feel like, oh no, he really does love her. He is so in love and very infatuated and enamored by her. And she is just so not made for this world, not made for this life, that she can't accept it or won't even open herself up to it.
I hadn't thought about that the wind also has already had its damage done to the other characters in the movie. But we don't get to see that because we never saw them outside of the wind.
Yeah.
But I hadn't thought about the fact that maybe that had already become commonplace in the way they understood themselves and relationships to each other. And, at the beginning of the kiss and not kiss thing, there is a little bit of will they, won't they? And then he just kind of pushes it too far. But you're right. He never forces her into anything else, keeps his distance, all of that. And it's clear throughout the rest of the film that she does really respect that as well. That he did keep true to his promise. And he says he'll raise up enough money that he can send her away out of this place. And so, throughout the rest of the film, they're trying to deal with the oppressive wind and its effect on their food supply. And the cowboys go out to go figure out what they're going to do. And Letty insists on coming with. And of course, she can't handle it. And Sourdough has to take her back to the house. But who appears but Wirt Roddy?
The scum that always comes back like a bad penny.
Right. And it's interestingly shot because he gets carried into the house, and at first she's so upset because she thinks it's Lige that is hurt, but no, it's Wirt. And there's another really great shot there where Wirt is hiding his face in his hands because he's in pain, and there's a transposed image where Gish is staring at him because she already knows his intentions with her, and it shows him looking at her and smirking.
Lie.
That was art.
The little things like that where they can visually reveal a character's psychology and inner struggle without having to articulate it through something like narration. Later on in sound films, when they give you that insight into a character's psyche, it's usually through some sort of voiceover narration. And to get it so succinctly, I mean, he looks like a wolf in sheep's clothing through that sly little smirk. She knows what he's really doing behind his hands.
Yeah.
Oh, sneaky.
And Gish has just really an amazing grip on facial expressions. Of course, they're all over the top because it's silent film, right? But she has eyebrows raised, head
Her
up.
eyes get huge, yeah.
She has gigantic eyes.
Yes.
And she's just really good at looking just absolutely frazzled, the whole time, just losing her grip on reality. And Wirt, as he's trying to recover, I don't know if he was actually ever injured or if he was just playing it up, he is psychologically tormenting her as well. So it's she has this presence in the house that's making her uncomfortable, and outside she can't even escape. And later on, she does try to run out into the wind, and it pushes her back into the house. It's so great the way that it works, and the masterful direction, I think, is really what seals it. Into the film, Wirt forces himself on her. Actually, did you realize that when you watched it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course. She is blown back into the house and collapses into Wirt's arms. Everything, and then it's a fade to black. You know what happened. I don't think that there's any other conclusions you could draw. It's exactly what you said. The force inside the house, the force outside the house, these forces acting upon her that she is powerless to fight off. I mean, she is so small, and petite. Again, she's like this porcelain doll up against gale force winds. I mean, of course it blows her over. She's like a plastic bag, completely bobbing in the wind, powerless and unable to stop it. Of course he takes advantage of her, and in the worst possible way, when she's at her most vulnerable, right, and when she can't fight back. And his forcing himself upon her is, of course, much, much worse than Lige's. I mean, it's sort of well, at least with Lige, she's married, and that's her wifely duties. Yeah. I don't so much believe. I truly don't really believe in that at all. However,
at the time,
I think that audiences would see that that fragile girl in the clutches of this wolf, and they would know, I know what he's doing. Yeah. That poor girl. Yeah. And then that poor girl, because it's not her fault.
Right. And it is really interesting, how it just alludes to what happens. There is the fade to black, and the next scene you see his gun belt on the table, and then you see him getting dressed, and you know something's happened.
Something awful. He had to get all the way. Why did he have to take his gun belt off?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the same time, though, this little tiny girl, she gets that gun, and she gets her power back. I think it's just amazing, just the turn. And, he is ugh, you're not going to do anything with that. And bam, he's dead.
Yeah. Okay. Now, let me ask you this. So He's dead. She has shot him. Surprised herself. Surprised us all. My job's on the floor. Do we... Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Should we keep going?
No, I think just do it. Just say what you want to say.
Do you really think all of that happened? Do you really think? Because then also part of me wonders, during the big nor'easter, sandstorm, gale force 5, wind blowing episode, weather event, it seems as though all of the men had left. And she's trying to close the door. The wind has blown it down. She's trying to barricade herself. And it's a hand that comes through Roddy's. And then all of this happens. She gets taken advantage of. He's putting on the gun belt. She shoots him. He's dead. She tries to bury the body. Do we really think all of that happened?
That's a good question.
Was it all just her psychological break of her being trapped in this home alone on, what is essentially, like a purgatory, where she's completely isolated and alone, no one there to protect her in the middle of this giant weather event that the house is shaking, she's shaking. Did it really happen?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about the idea perhaps that was all a hallucination because, and it really is kind of supported by the film itself, because once she buries Wirt out in the sand, there's this great image where the wind blows the sand off of the body and she opens the door. Well, the door never fully closes. That's also a really great metaphor there. The door, she can't even get it to close because there's so much sand against it. She's propping it closed with a shovel. Well, it blows open and then she sees his face peering out of the sand. And then again, a fist on the door, just like the vision of Wirt previously, and in comes Lige. And she is so relieved to see him. She's crying and she's in his arms and she tells him just plainly, I killed Wirt Roddy. He's out there in the sand and he doesn't see anything.
Yeah. There was nothing there.
And there's never any well, no, he's definitely dead out there and I shot him. I hadn't thought about that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it sort of seemed to me like that was her, in her mind, conquering this oppressive force and accepting her place on the frontier in this desert. She's fighting those demons that brought her there, and she's accepted her role, her designated role, because when Lige comes in, I know you picked up on this, and I know that because it made my ears perk up when the intertitle says, the wind, this is a rough paraphrase, the wind don't judge. If it was injustice, it covers all of that. Right?
I wrote it down actually because you got it exactly. I was like, oh, I like that because when he looks outside, he says, "There's nothing out there, nothing but sand. Wind's mighty odd. If you kill a man in justice, it allers covers him up." I know
the phonetic spelling of it all, to give a country accent.
They love doing that.
They love doing that. But I love that because that was so refreshing. First of all, that he's like, well, it was done injustice. He could. It seemed as though he could immediately imagine. Oh, yeah. I bet I know why you did that, and if that's the case, then it's been done in justice.
Yeah, there is a scene earlier actually when Wirt is recovering in the house and he's kind of made a move on Letty, and Lige comes in and Letty immediately rushes to him, and that's the first time they've touched since they've been married. And I kind of wondered, did Lige know that Wirt was kind of acting strange? Because then he's like, hey, you got to come on the roundup with me. Yeah. You got to come. All the guys got to come. And Wirt's like, fine, I guess I'll go. So, yeah, I hadn't thought about the idea that maybe that never happened. I mean, it would be kind of crazy for Wirt to make it all the way through that windstorm.
Yeah, by himself. And stay there, and then how did he get away from all the guys, and how did he find the house like that? Because it looks like it's also just the sandstorms, it blocks out the sun. Right. And I sort of took it as that was her psychological break, by the end of it, and that it really truly never happened, but it also very well could have, because I mean, I don't think it's so unlikely.
Yeah, it is, it's one of those just for the drama, like just for the story, like kind of moments, like, suspend your disbelief. And, again, as Gish said, they had this ending at first where she would just go out into the desert and basically succumb to the elements, which I imagine would have been that Lige doesn't come home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, like, maybe she really did kill Wirt.
Yeah.
And no one came to, like, save or rescue, and she just leaves. Or maybe it was still that psychotic break.
Yeah.
And, deep in the throes of that.
It is kind of like, I had originally chose this movie like to put on my watch list as part of like a Halloween watch list. I didn't end up getting to it, but I had chosen it because I think it has enough elements to almost be considered a little bit of a horror film.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
I think like psychological horror, oppressive, just like the setting is its own kind of horror. Of course, with the ending that they did not want, Lige and Letty embrace, and he says, "Won't you always be afraid of the wind?" And she goes, I'm not afraid of it anymore. Which is like, it's so interesting knowing that was not really the ending that they wanted. In fact, Gish says in this intro that she felt it was morally unjust, which I think is a very strong word for an ending you didn't like. But it is such like a immediate heel turn in her character.
Yeah. Oh, as soon as he's there.
Yeah.
Oh, my man's here. I'm fine. I don't know why I was crazy like that. I
have been there before.
I just miss my man so much.
I've definitely been there before.
Happens to the best of us.
How did this film make you feel?
Fearful. Pretty overwhelmed and fearful for, what was going to happen to this vulnerable young woman. And of course, my mind went to the worst possible places. And the narrative also took me there as well.
Right.
But then by the end, I am a sucker. And I like that she decides to trust in him and to love him, and that he gets to love her as well. You're my husband, you're my wife, to work with you, to love you. That they sort of have this like equity in their relationship that they can both achieve was very touching to me. And they found love even in the most unlikely of places. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I was rooting for them from the get-go with the like initial embrace. Of course, he does come on a little too strong, but in like the first kind of moments, it's kind of like like she kisses him back, and then she goes to get ready for bed, and he's pacing outside, and there's this really great image. I was thinking again, you had mentioned something about like the view of the hands with the marriage. The director does a good job of also focusing on other moments where it's like disembodied. Mm-hmm. And there's this great scene where he's pacing in the larger room and she's in the bedroom, and you just see their feet like back and forth. Yeah. It goes to like her delicate shoes and his like work boots.
Stompy work boots.
Yeah, you just see them, and then you see that he like rushes through the door to go confront her again as you see his boots meet her shoes. It's just so interesting that he decided to focus on that instead of pulling out to the bigger image.
Yeah.
And of course it doesn't really work out for him that way, because that's when she says, "You made me hate you." But like there was kind of this, it might have worked out had he just not been, maybe as you said, so riled up.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed this film. I felt very pleased that the selection was worthwhile.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Good choice.
I was very pleased with that. I really enjoyed the film. I think just so many great camera directions. And Gish was just so, all her emotions on play. It was just so impressive. It just really reminds you what a really good silent film can be.
This was the standard. This was the kind of like storytelling that audience were getting consistently.
Right.
And now performances like this, directing like this, style like this, flash and flare like this, it feels so few and far in between.
Right. Well, would you check it out again?
Yes, absolutely. I would 100% check this out again. Even though I do not have a VHS player, I would just check it out just to be in possession of it.
I agree. I think it was just a really enjoyable watch. I think watching it again, because even just from the like 1.5 times that I watched it, I noticed new details the second time around. And it's really made me want to also read the book.
Yeah, that could be really interesting and see, what that ending would have been like.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's interesting that a film like this has so many, the creation of it involved the hands of so many women. You have Gish being like creative design behind it. You have the adaptation being done by Frances Marion, and then you have the novel by Dorothy Scarborough.
Yeah.
That's very impressive to me. I think that's really cool.
Very feminist.
Yeah.
Feminist filmmaking.
Do you think it would be worth a late fee?
Yes, because again, I don't have the VHS, so I would hold on to it too long.
You got to track down a VCR.
Yeah, I got to track down a VCR, and I got to figure out, hey, who can I watch this with?
I think we were like the first people to check it out, and
I think 10
almost
or 20
10 years.
Almost 10 years, or no, because it said 2004.
Yeah, I think actually
that it had been like inspected.
One of our coworkers checked it out recently.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah, which I thought was very funny. I was like, of course, only one of the other people that also engage with old stuff would have checked out a VHS from the library.
Antiques.
Did you happen to find any like books or anything like that kind of made you think about the film or you associate with the film? Just kind of a free associative type thing.
Well, so I was kind of thinking, if you were to see this film and you really enjoyed some of the more central elements of like this man versus nature, really this is woman versus nature, but like man versus nature, you might also enjoy another silent film from 1926 called The Winning of Barbara Worth. That also takes place in the desert. That is also a sort of man versus nature, man attempting to thwart and subdue nature by damming a river and then eventually creating a man-made lake. There's a humongous flood disaster. So there's that natural disaster element that arises, as well as multiple fun romantic subplots that is sure to also keep your attention if you are romantic at heart. This one is not, however, a horror movie. This is a little more of like a romance drama. And then as far as books go, I tried to do some research to see if I could find anything else out on this film. Mm-hmm. My research did not prove very fruitful. So then I thought a little outside of the box of what is a story that could also sort of scratch that itch of perhaps maybe female insanity. Mm-hmm. So I thought, of course, The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. That is a fantastic piece of short story narrative fiction wherein a woman trapped in a room is driven mad by the wallpaper. So the force inside and the force outside and turmoil therein.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I thought about The Grapes of Wrath.
Yes.
John Steinbeck, a classic, and it's a different type of wind, but it's also very similar, and it does reflect the emotional turmoil of characters. I looked up a little bit about actors and people involved in the film, and of course, you can find a biography for almost anybody from that era. So there are multiple biographies about Lillian Gish. Some that mentioned the wind would be Lillian Gish, the movies Mr. Griffith and Me by Lillian Gish and Anne Pinshow. An Actor's Life for Me, as told by Lillian Gish to Selma G. Lanes. There is a biography about Victor Sjöström, his life and his work by Forsland. And also, as I mentioned, Louis B. Mayer's biography mentions the wind's ending. So not so much about this film in particular. None of these really are. But you can find a passing mention to the wind in them. So worth checking out if you are interested in learning more about these silent film players. Also, there's a really great Library of Congress essay associated with the wind's announcement to the National Film Preservation List. I really enjoyed just kind of seeing a little bit more of like the academic wrestling with this film and its impact and all of that kind of stuff. And that's really done well in the Library of Congress essay. Every film named to the preservation list, I'm pretty sure has some sort of essay attached to it because they have to justify why.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. There's at least some sort of like tidbit about the film and why it was named to the list. So I really recommend checking those out if you see a film that you really enjoy and you find out it's on the list. Yeah, anything else you want to say about the movie?
No. No, it certainly inspires conversation, but I think I'd like another rewatch.
Yeah, agreed. I would definitely like to watch this one again, and especially in a time where you're not having to pause it and take notes like I did.
Oh, yeah.
I kept pausing. I was like, wait, I want to write down that intertitle.
Like, oh, I need to grapple with this thought. I need to work this out. Sometimes it is hard to like turn off that part of your brain and just like enjoy the story being told to you.
Yeah.
So I get that. Yeah. When we get to watch it for fun instead of for work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you enjoyed Check Out Cinema, then be sure to check us out on socials. We are at checkout_cinema on Instagram and elsewhere, I presume, when we establish that. We are hosting through Spotify, and we will eventually get a website up and running.
No rush on that.
Yeah, who uses websites anymore anyway? And then also, do you want to plug your personal Letterboxd or anything?
Oh, sure. I can't even remember what my personal Letterboxd is.
Oh, we can link it somewhere.
We can link it, but I absolutely have one. If you guys would like to follow me for more fabulous takes, I'm Amelia Grindhouse. Capital Grindhouse. You can find me there. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and she actually writes reviews on her Letterboxd. Unlike me, I just write my favorite quote from the movie and give it a rating with no explanation whatsoever, unless the movie was really bad, and then I do usually explain why I did that. My Letterboxd is Honeyed Life. And also, we are two librarians that enjoy using the library, but the views in this podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our employer. And I think that's it. Okay. Bye.